Port, Connecticut, but I was raised in Brooklyn and New York, and ultimately on Long Island. Is this too loud? Okay, I'm just getting a feedback here. And my dad was worked for the Associated Press and was a closet Irish intellectual, of which there are many. Sometimes they're in the pub rather than the closet, but in fact, quite a few times. But and he got me turned on to reading, and it's interesting to be talking here tonight in the library. I used to, as early as 9 years old, I would be at the one of the branches of the Brooklyn Public Library, the Queens Public Library, always on Thursday, and I would always take 10 books, because that's all they would let me take. All of which I would have read by the weekend. These were not all, we're not talking about incredibly complicated books, but I had a tremendous appetite for reading, given to me by my father, and I still have it. And I'm grateful. Also, not a Kindle owner. I like to read. I like to, Scott Turow is a friend of mine, and Scott came out with a recent book, I can't remember, I think it was called, not Verdict, Innocent, or I can't remember. But it's a great book. It's a great book about the law, and he's a wonderful writer. And he noticed me carrying, I was in Chicago, he noticed me carrying a shopping bag full of books. He says, "Who'd you buy?" I said, "They're all your book. I give them as presents." And people, even today, including my daughters, who are Kindle users, get furious when they say, "Why do you buy all these books? All you have to do is give somebody a gift card or something." I said, "You don't understand. It's a book. It's something you can hold. You can read it." And I can't believe that the writers are getting more money for the book than they are for that piece of electronic, whatever the hell it is, that goes through the wires. Anyway, the point is that I'm not going to change, and my father never changed, but reading and writing and literacy and was important to me from an early age, and given to me by my dad.
It's interesting. Your dad had a choice at one point when he came back from World War II. A lot of the people he hung out with, you can mention, went on to go into the medium of TV, of radio and television. Right. They wanted him to join, but he stayed faithful to print.
Well, the funny thing is probably very similar to me with the Kindle. I did a picture one night. It wasn't actually, it was a live telecast. Some of you may remember this. George Clooney somehow got Warner Brothers to agree to put on a live telecast, maybe 10 years ago, of a thing called Red Alert. And they had all these sound stages, and it was a 3-hour movie about an invasion, a possible old-style nuclear invasion of New York, with a whole bunch of actors. And I remember the British director, whose name I can't think of right now, said to me, "Why are we doing this? Why can't we put it on tape and rehearse and everything?" Anyway, we did it live. Walter Cronkite was there. And Cronkite came over to me and he said, "Was your father Ed Denny?" And I said, "Yes, he was." He says, "He was an amazing newspaper man, a wonderful." We went on and on about my father, knowing my father in London. And he said to me, "What do you think about all this, what we were doing there that night?" And I said, "Well, my father would have hated it. My father loved books and he loved movies, but the whole idea of doing something deliberately that didn't have to be done in that way." Now, making a newspaper was not only important, it was an absolutely vital thing. Richard will remember the old rolls of yellow paper that would come off the teletype machines, and they would rip them across, and my father would bring home these pencils which were made with cardboard. Remember the cardboard wrapped around the lead, and then you would pull a string? And he would do his work with that. And I remember walking into 50 Rock, which is where the AP General Headquarters was, 4th floor. And when the elevator doors opened on the floor, you could hear this racket, this noise, unbelievable noise of people shouting, hundreds of people shouting, machines, teletype machines, old typewriters, a room twice as large as this, filled with desks and people running around, teletype machines along the wall, typewriters on these desks, these battered desks, and people howling at each other. And in that chaos, these people were writing and thinking and on telephones and talking across the world and so on and so forth. That's the way it used to be. And he never wanted it to change. Obviously it does. I went back years later to talk to the AP editorial board, and when the elevator doors opened and I could hear nothing, went into the room, and the room was filled with people, but all you could hear was the click. And there were hushed tones. I said, well, we're all changed now. But in any case, he was, he gave me a gift that you never can understand the value of, which is to appreciate the word, the written word, the thought behind the word, and the person who was behind all of it. And so writers and thinkers have always been extremely important to me. Now, as an actor today, doing Shakespeare and Pinter, it's more true now and at the age of 73 than it ever was before. But it's all about the written word and the thought behind the written word and the person who's doing the thinking.
What brought you to the place where you started getting into theater? I mean, you're an Irish Catholic boy, big hearty type, going to Catholic boys' high school. What got you into this?
I was a football player and a kind of a show-off. I know it's hard to believe, but I was. And I was a clown on the football field as I was any place else. I had a wonderful teacher named Chris Sweeney, who's still alive. And in those days, in 1952 or 53, if you were a Catholic high school lay teacher in Brooklyn, you might be lucky if you made $50 a week. And for $50 a week, he did everything. He was a coach, he was an English teacher, a wonderful English teacher. And he decided in his spare time that he would start a drama club, which he did. And the first play that he decided to do was Macbeth. And he decided that I should play the king, Macbeth. I was 14. And the audience were 400 Irish Catholic schoolboys from Brooklyn, for whom the most dramatic moment that they could possibly imagine was Jackie Robinson turning a double play at Ebbets Field. Okay? Anything more complicated than that was hardly drama. In any case, my friends in the business always say when I tell this story, my God, what guts to do Shakespeare, to do Macbeth in front of a group of Catholic high school boys in Brooklyn in 1953. You were a brave, brave man, boy. I say, not nearly as brave as the freshman who played Lady Macbeth. And he was very good at it, too.
Do we ever know what happened to him?
Well, that's the funny story. There is a button on the story which I never anticipated. Years later, talking to Chris Sweeney, the guy who ran that club, and who started us all off, the kid's name was Marius Panzarella. Beautiful Italian boy. He was 13 or 14. Had a wonderful husky voice, and he was a hell of a Lady Macbeth. So I said to Chris, I said, whatever happened to Marius? Are you in touch with Marius? He said, oh, yeah. I said, so tell me, is he a hairdresser, a designer? He says, no, he's a hunting and fishing guide on Kodiak Island. How's that for an act of compensation?
Yeah.
No, he's just a real tough guy, you know, despite that beginnings. But everything was different in those days. So.
Now, despite that promising start, you know, working up the top in one of Shakespeare's tragedies, you didn't really go on right away into theater, did you? No.
Well, we did some plays at high school. I went to Columbia, right? I got a football scholarship to Columbia, believe it or not. As bad as that football team was, they gave out scholarships. And because that would have been now 57, 58, which was the height of, or the beginning of the height of Kerouac and On the Road and Black Berets, I remember the theater group did Marat Sade, which is one of the most complicated plays you can imagine, with huge numbers of actors. And when I showed up to audition wearing my football zippered jacket, I was made to feel not welcome. So I never did anything there. And then after that, I was in the Marine Corps for almost 4 years. And needless to say, there wasn't much dramatic activity in that, except for the PR involved in being in the Marine Corps. And it was years later that I was probably 25, 26, married, a couple of kids, and for some reason I started making the rounds in New York. I did a couple of plays off Broadway, and at the age of 28, there was a little theater called it was actually in an old subway warehouse, and the cut into the stone in front of this big, massive building were the initials of one of the subways, IRT. And there was a group in there called the Impossible Ragtime Theater because of the letters on which had nothing whatever to do with the subway, of course. And they did a production of Ivanov, Chekhov's first full-length play. And essentially it was a vanity production built around this well-known New York actor, whose name I won't mention. And it was for him that the show was being done, to strut his stuff as Ivanov and so forth. And I got the small part of Aborkin, which was the classic Chekhovian Russian peasant, made famous later on with Lopakin, of course, in Cherry Orchard, which I also played later on. Anyway, long story short, I mean, I was working. I was driving a cab. I was driving a truck. I can't remember. Maybe I always had a job. And going to the theater. And I didn't even know it, but Mel Gusso, God bless him, who was the second chair critic for the New York Times, had come to see the production and wrote this review. And in those days, everybody read the Times. Everybody read the Times, and especially the theater section, whatever it was called in those days, the arts. No, except, of course, I didn't read the Times. I read the Daily News, or maybe the Post. But anyway, I came in. We do the shows on the weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I came in on Thursday, and I noticed that everybody was, and it was a big cast, everybody was distinctly cold to me, which was unusual. I mean, none of us were making any money. I mean, any money, no money. And we were all just kind of doing it for ourselves.